Hi guys, welcome back to China Admissions channel, and today I'll be sharing with you about how much does it cost to study in China. But before that, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like and also share this video. A lot of you are asking me about the cost of studying in China, and I remember I mentioned it before that studying in China is actually cheaper than if you choose to study somewhere else like US, UK, Europe, Australia, or even if you choose to study to Japan. And I know that budget or the estimated cost plays an important role in deciding where to go if you plan to study abroad. And so in today's video, I'll be sharing with you about the cost of studying in China, the living cost in China based on my experience living in Beijing. I will also be sharing about the cost comparison if you choose to study in China versus if you choose to study at other countries like US, UK, Australia, and Japan. Okay, so first of all, it's going to be about the cost of studying in China, and that includes the tuition fee, the accommodation cost, and also the living cost in China. But besides that, there might be other costs such as the visa fee, the insurance, and also the books if there's any. And also, I'll share everything today in US dollar to make it easier because I know that some of you are more familiar in converting US dollar to your local currency compared to if you have to convert RMB or the Chinese yuan to your local currency. Okay, so the tuition fee in China are as follows. So for the English third degree programs, so programs like Bachelor, Master, and PhD, the tuition fee starts from 2,500 US dollar per year. So again, it depends on the program you're applying for. It depends on the type of university you're applying for as well. Obviously, if you are applying for the international universities like those with dual degree opportunities, for example, then the tuition fee might be more expensive than if you apply to like other public universities. And also for the non-degree program, for example, the Chinese language learning program, or like one semester program in business, or like one semester program in IT, for example. So for programs like this, the tuition fee will start from 1,000 US dollar per semester. So for non-degree programs, normally you can choose to study for either one semester or 1 year long. So for example, if you choose to study for 1 year, then the tuition fee will be double. So if let's say the tuition fee is about 1,000 US dollar per semester, then if you choose to study for 1 year, the tuition fee will be about $2,000 per year. And remember, tuition fee in China is to be paid yearly. So for example, if you are studying master's program for 2 years, it means that every year, like once a year, you have to pay the tuition fee in full amount. So next is about the accommodation. So in terms of accommodations, international students can choose to either stay on campus, which is on the university's dormitories, or they can also choose to stay off campus, which means they rent a place outside of campus, like they rent a room or the whole apartment for themselves. On-campus accommodation is usually cheaper than renting a place outside of campus. However, the number of dormitories available at the university might be limited because they have a lot of international students and they may not have a room for everyone. So if that's the case, you might need to find a room outside of campus. You might need to rent a room outside of campus. You can do it with your friends, right? Like you can rent like the whole apartment together with your friends, or you can choose to like rent a room with other people as well. So this can be a good opportunity as well, especially if your housemate are Chinese. So you can have an opportunity to get to know them, to get to know the Chinese culture better, and also to practice your Chinese when talking to your housemates. Okay, about the cost of the on-campus accommodation, roughly, you need about 100 US dollar to 400 US dollar per month for the on-campus accommodation. And that excludes the water, electricity, and also the internet. So again, I cannot really say the exact fee for each universities because different universities have different accommodation costs as well. Again, it depends on the city that you're living in. For example, if you study in Beijing or Shanghai, obviously the on-campus accommodation cost would be higher than if you choose to study somewhere else, like in Guangzhou, for example, or in Xiamen. And also, the cost will also depend on the type of room you're getting. So for example, if you choose to get a single room, then obviously you have to pay more than if you choose to stay in a double room, for example, or if you choose to stay like with like 4 other people. So yeah, it depends on the room type and also the location of your campus. But a good thing about on-campus accommodation, aside from it's being cheap than like the off-campus accommodation, is that there are many facilities available inside the university area. So Chinese universities in China are normally very big in terms of size. For example, Tsinghua University, it's so big I get lost there. I got lost in Peking University as well. I still can, travel around UIBE. which is where I studied before, because UIP is actually not that big. But like other universities in China is actually so big that you might actually get lost inside. So the beauty about living on campus is actually the facilities that the university offers, because they do have a lot of facilities that international students can use as well. So if you stay in dormitories, for sure you have access to kitchen. A kitchen should be available anytime. They usually provide stove there and also the washing basin. But aside from that, like all the utensils and everything, you have to prepare it by yourself. And besides that, university also do provide laundry machines, but you have to pay to use that. But it's very convenient because you can just, do the laundry downstairs, for example. And there are other facilities that they offer as well, like the sports facilities, like there are sports fields, gyms, even like swimming pools. It's available at some universities. And also cafeteria. So cafeteria is available in China for breakfast, lunch, and dinner time, which is awesome. And then there are mini markets, library, and like small shops available inside the university area as well. So I remember when I was studying at UIBE, inside the UIBE campus area, there are the mobile phone service shops, there are printing shops, there are even like a bookstore inside. And I heard that right now they do have restaurants inside as well. And for sure they have a boba tea shop, which is awesome. But the downside about living on campus is that because their room availability is very limited, that's why in most cases you cannot choose the room, right? So the university will choose the available room for you. They'll like just assign you the available room. And that in most cases as well, it's quite difficult to get a single room. So you might end up living together with a roommate. Like for example, the two of you will be staying together, or maybe like the 3 or 4 of you will be staying together. So if you don't really like living together with other people on the same room, right? If you want to have your own privacy, then renting a place outside of campus might be a good idea for you. It might be a solution if you want a private room all for yourself. So if you choose to stay outside of campus, you can either rent a room or you can rent the whole apartment for yourself. So the cost is going to be various. It depends on the type of room you're getting, the size of the room, and also the location of your place as well. The rent in Beijing and Shanghai will be more expensive compared to other cities in China. So if you choose to rent a room with a shared bathroom and also shared kitchen in Beijing, you need at least $400 per month if you choose to stay within the city center. Or if you wanna have like a cheaper option, you might wanna consider staying in the suburbs, which is it's like about 15 kilometers away from the city center, and that would cost you about 30 to 50% cheaper than the cost in the city center. But this is the Beijing standard. So Beijing and Shanghai considered as the most expensive cities in China. So if you are going to study somewhere else, like perhaps Guangzhou, Xiamen, or like Ningbo, Suzhou, or in Shenyang, Dalian, or like any other cities, right? I believe the cost would be cheaper than Beijing. So next up is about the living expenses, like the meal, transportation, and shopping. And this is based on my experience living in Beijing. So in terms of eating, it depends on where you eat. So for example, if you choose to cook by yourself versus if you eat at the restaurant, for sure you'll spend more if you're eating at the restaurant. Based on my experience eating at the cafeteria at UIBE, for like one standard meal will cost me around $2 per meal. But if I choose to eat at a small restaurant, like there are like small restaurants nearby the campus area, that might cost me around like $3 to $4 each meal. But then if I want to go a little bit fancy and I want to eat like Japanese ramen or like Korean barbecue or like some Italian pasta, for example, or pizza, and that might cost me a little bit more than that. So I need about $10 per meal in Beijing. But then if I want to go even fancier than that, I want to go eat some Beijing Kaoya, that's like the Peking duck, or I want to eat like Chinese hot pot, for example, or if I want to go to like some fancy Western restaurant, that might cost me at least $20 per meal. And another important thing is boba. I think boba has gained its popularity throughout the years, right? So boba is basically a Chinese culture. So boba is life in China. So to drink a glass of boba, you just need $2 per glass. And that's like so cheap and like so delicious at the same time. And another thing that I like about eating at the restaurant in China is that Chinese restaurants throughout the country, right? Whether you are eating at the Japanese ramen place, for example, or whether you're eating Korean barbecue, they will always serve you free water. But normally they'll serve you hot water. So it's going to be a bit unusual if you first come to China, but eventually, trust me, it's going to be a good habit for yourself. And then in terms of transportation, I think transportation in China is relatively affordable. So if you choose to ride a bus, for example, like for one trip, it will only cost you like $0.2. And then if you choose to ride a subway, it will cost you around $0.2 to $0.8 per trip. If you choose to ride a taxi or like ride Didi, Didi is like the ride-hailing apps in China. It's like the Uber of China. So if you choose to ride Didi or taxi, that might cost you about $3 to $4 for like every 5 kilometers. So in my opinion, transportation in China, it's relatively affordable. It's very, very convenient. Because in China, regardless the size of the city, whether it's a big city or it's a small city, the transportation system are all integrated. Everything is easily available for you. So subway and bus, they're available, I think it's almost 24 hours. So it's like starting from like 5 a.m. in the morning up until like 11 or like 12 a.m. at night. So in conclusion, in terms of the living cost and also the accommodation, you will need about 500 to 800 US dollar per month, which is, in my opinion, it's pretty affordable compared to if you study at other countries. Next part, I will share with you the cost comparison if you choose to study in China versus other countries like US, UK, Australia, and also Japan. So I've made a table where you can see the cost comparison if you choose to study in China versus other countries like Australia, Japan, US, and UK. The tuition fee and also the living costs that are listed on the table are based on the data that I got from the internet. So it is the estimated average cost of what the international students spend during their studies at those following countries. So okay, let's discuss the first one, which is if you choose to study in Australia. So if you choose to study in Australia, the tuition fee per year would be roughly about 22 to 23,000 US dollar. As for the living expenses, that would be about 12,000 to 17,000 US dollar per year. And if you choose to study in Japan, Japan is cheaper than Australia. So if you choose to study in Japan, that would be about 5,000 to 28,000 per year. And then for the living expenses, that would be about 7,000 to 16,000 US dollar per year. And then next up, if you choose to study in the UK, then the tuition fee would be about 14,000 to 38,000 US dollar per year. And then for the living expenses, roughly in a year, you will need about 9,500 to 12,000 US dollar. Meanwhile, if you choose to study in the US, the tuition fee would be about 11,000 to 36,000 US dollar, while the living expenses in the US, roughly you need about 10,000 to 14,000 US dollar per year. And then if you choose to study in China, again, this is why I mentioned China is cheaper compared to other countries for studying abroad. So if you choose to study in China, the tuition fee will be about 2,500 to 13,000 US dollar per year. So the university with high tuition fee are mainly the international universities. For example, XJTLU, Xianjiaotong Liverpool University, or University Nottingham Ningpo China, which are basically the branch of the universities which are located in the UK. So both of these universities have campuses in the UK, but the difference is that if you choose to study at XJTLU, for example, or UNNC in China, the living expenses will be even cheaper than if you choose to study at their UK campus. Because the living expenses per year in China, you will only need about 6,000 to 12,000 US dollar per year. If you choose to study at the international universities like XJTLU or UNNC with the same quality of education, right, as what you get if you choose to study at their UK campus, you only need to pay cheaper living expenses. But other than that, you can also choose to study at Chinese public universities, those with cheaper tuition fee, for example. So the tuition fee for public universities in China are roughly about 2,500 to 5,000 US dollar per year. So this is why studying in China is actually cheaper than if you choose to study somewhere else. And this is why you should consider studying in China, because you can get the study abroad experience, but it's not going to break your bank account. So yeah, if you have any more questions about studying in China, about applying to Chinese universities, about the programs available at Chinese universities, do check our platform, China Admissions. We attached the link on the description box down below so you can check it. And if you still have any more questions, feel free to email us as well, and we will assist you and help you with your applications to Chinese universities.